Good evening, Los Angeles and Southern California. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I am your host here this evening. I am a veteran advocate and the managing attorney at the Veterans Law Group who hosts this show. A little bit about us. We've been practicing VA disability compensation for about 25 years. That means that we advocate for veterans before the VA. Who knows that anybody who was out there seeking your benefits before the VA would need an attorney, but unfortunately, that happens way more often than I would like to admit. I often say that I wish I did not have this job because I wish it would not be necessary. But here I am, happy to advocate for veterans and their families and to pursue the things that we as a country promised them when they signed up to serve our country and to defend our freedoms and do the things that most of us have a hard time doing. Our staff is made up of mostly veterans and military spouses and family members of veterans, so it's really awesome to be able to work every single day, not only with people who've served our country alongside them, but also to work with them as clients and people that we get to represent and fight for every day. This show is one of the joys of my week every single week. We broadcast here every Tuesday night from 7 to 8 o'clock on 790 KABC. And we do a little bit of different things, sometimes just answering questions about VA disability benefits, how you can help kind of navigate the process. Sometimes we've just got news going on or organizations that are helping veterans. What I love to do when we're answering your calls live, which is what we will be doing this evening, is to have my co-host here, Star, who joins us periodically. She is a U.S. Air Force veteran and a paralegal and currently helps our team in what we call kind of the initial consultation process, where anybody out there who has questions about working with VA benefits, you've got an appeal you want to do, you're probably going to hit Star or Karen in our office first, who's going to answer your questions, see if you need our assistance, or point you in the right direction for where you need. So Star, thank you once again for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
And again, we're taking your calls live tonight. And typically when we do live calls, we will have maybe a topic that we might throw out there and start talking about. But if you've got questions related to anything VA disability, reach out to us at 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-KABC. You can also submit your questions via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and you can also find us on YouTube. I've got some interesting questions that have been posted on YouTube the last couple of weeks that I would love to get to, unless we're dealing with live calls. So once again, thank you, Star, and I think we talked a little bit about the subject we wanted to talk about tonight. However, I would love to spring this on you a little bit because I was just reading some of the recent news of what's going on in the military community, and I was, dealing with MST cases. Of those who are unfamiliar, those are called military sexual trauma cases. It's basically sexual assault cases in the military. They call it something different. Are very near and dear to my heart. I have a soft spot for those. And it looks like the Biden administration just signed an executive order that they are now treating sexual harassment very specifically as a crime in the military. I don't know if that's something that you've heard of or have any sort of perspective on you'd like to offer. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Not a problem. I did not know that they just did that. So to me, it's a beneficial thing, but at the same time, it's one of those that I'm kind of on the line with when they do it with the sexual harassment, simply because there are individuals that are in our military that, in order to try to get out early or are trying to get placed in a different location, will sometimes add a little bit more drama to what has gone on. So I have seen some veterans' lives ruined because of that. And so it's one of those where it's like a catch-22. It's a really good thing because, sexual harassment shouldn't be happening, whether you're a female or a male in the military. Being in myself, I never had to deal with that. It could have just been my personality or it could have been just the people that I was around where I didn't have to ever deal with something like that. But I do know that there are so many different ways that it can be taken. And when women join the military, a lot of men, were completely against it. And so by adding more and more, you get that kind of kickback from a lot of older minded veterans that they kind of say like, okay, well, let's not have women in the military then if you're going to keep putting more and more restrictions and then give them the ability to hurt us if they may want to do so.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, the legal mind in me first jumped on how are you defining sexual harassment? Because it's very specifically to sexual harassment, not sexual assault. Obviously, sexual assault is something I'm going to jump all over because that's that thing I have a particular soft spot for when it comes to the military in particular. But I found it interesting that the immediate thing that I wanted to do while reading this article, which is on stripes.com, was about how are they defining that? And it's interesting because they indicate, the press secretary, Jen Psaki, indicated that the order was created in honor of Vanessa Gillen, and then it says a 20-year-old small arms repair who was killed by another soldier in 2020 after being sexually harassed. There's going to be a lot more to that story. For sure.
Oh yeah.
And
exactly.
wondering if if it was really after being sexually harassed or if there was clearly more going on. Because things can be defined as sexual harassment that can, you can get super soft on that kind of thing, or you can be really strict on it. And how do you navigate that? And I feel definitely for those, people working in JAG and those military officers and commanding officers are having to navigate that, because that's, when things change politically in the from the top down, that goes down, I always wonder, how does that really work out for the team that you're working with and you're in responsible for, that have been working together for years and maybe has a certain camaraderie that's not a problem to anybody and doesn't really cross the line. But, sexual harassment in the civil world comes down to hostile environment, and what do you define as hostile environment? So it's specifically difficult. It is difficult in the civilian world. It's got to be incredibly difficult to navigate that while you're in the military.
Oh, exactly. And I think too, it's like you said, it's where you do draw the line because as you've probably seen with having so many veterans in the office, that our personalities and our sarcasm seem to differ a lot from civilians. So, it really depends on, like how bad it can really become. And like I said, I definitely believe in it. It's just, where do they draw that line?
Yeah, it seems to be it'll be interesting how it plays out, because as I said, I'm definitely very protective, but at the same time, I also don't want people to get a little overboard. So anyway, I just saw that before we jumped on, and I thought I would get your initial thoughts before we launched into something else. So you're listening to The Veteran's Voice. This is Amanda Manier. I'm here with often co-host Star, who U.S. Air Force veteran, and also helps me and our office and many others with veterans that are navigating the process of getting your disability benefits. So if you have any questions and you're listening in, we are taking calls live today, 800-222-5222. We'd be happy to chat with you about any thoughts that you have or questions. One of the things that seems to be a topic that comes up a lot, and a question that Star dealing with right now on the front end of helping with screening clients and answering initial lead questions and doing some of those initial consultations, that comes up a lot seems to be, I'm either trying to, out in the public when I'm talking, I'm either trying to convince a veteran that it's okay to file a claim, or I seem to have the other realm of people who are doing whatever they can to get to that 100% disability. It's that magic number of 100%. And I have a feeling or a kind of a gut check of, it's not always about the percentage of 100%, but they're seeking that permanent disability where the VA can't take it away from them. Can you speak to a little bit about that, Star?
I feel like that's a lot of times what it comes down to, because the VA regulations, the only time you ever see permanent and total come across is at the 100% rating. And you don't, as a veteran, and myself, getting the rating decisions and kind of knowing how, like, you see it from the veteran side. Like, I can see it from their side, and then I can kind of see it from paralegal side. As the veteran side, the VA never really tells you in so many words if they're making a determination on disabilities being a permanent disability, unless you get like a specific sheet from the VA that will list it. And so without knowing that they're considering it a static disability, you're kind of left out wondering, like, okay, well, are they going to be sending me back for more exams? When are those exams going to be? And so I think a lot of times, too, it's more with a lot of the mental disabilities, because that adds to the anxiety. It adds to, oh, man, I gotta prep, and you're 3 years out from an exam, but you already are having all of these complications with anxiety and depression, and having to know that you're going to have to relive the situation all over again when you go back in. So I do see that quite often.
Well, and I wonder if it would be better just to correct. It's either you're looking for that permanent and total being 100%, or you got to pass that magic 10-year mark. You've been rated for this issue for 10 years, and so then they can't go back and take it away from you. And I've seen people, at a 10%, and that is ultimately kicks in. But I think that there's some certainty to that 10 years. If I get past the 10 years, then they can't take it away. Or if I'm permanent and total, they can't take it away. But if I'm living in the middle of that limbo, the VA is not very consistent, or they're very arbitrary on when and if they call you in for a new exam to be reevaluated. So we've had many clients who they got rated 3 years ago and suddenly get a letter saying it's time for your reevaluation, and others that it's been 8 years and they've never been asked to be reevaluated. And I wish that the VA would be more consistent. Like, you got your rating and you'll be reevaluated every 3 years or whatever the time frame is until we determine that it's a permanent disability. I don't know about your thoughts on that, but I feel like that would at least create some sort of certainty, instead of one day you get the mail and you get called in. It's like worse than jury duty.
Exactly. I feel that it is.
I actually like jury duty. So I say that, but it's that whole thing that just pops in the mail and now you got to go do something that you weren't planning on doing.
Exactly. And like I said, depending on what issue it is and just how busy you are with your life, it becomes a hassle. And then even making and scheduling with the outside provider that's going to do that CMP exam can become a hassle. So it's a lot of veterans dread just that process alone.
Sure, definitely, because you also, you risk the chance of being reduced. It's one of the things that drives me crazy about VA when it comes to mental health. It's a lot of times somebody finally reaches the ability to have some financial stability through their support from the VA. And maybe they're now finally seeking treatment because they're not so worried about finances. And then when you have that constant fear of not being able to take care of your kids or take care of your family because you're struggling with working or dealing with your mental health, it just like pulls the rug out from underneath them. So when we get back, we're about to go to a break. And when we get back, I want to dive into a little bit about, there's multiple different ways you can get that 100%, that permanent, straight schedular, TDIU. We're going to talk a little bit about unemployability. And again, we're taking our calls live. So if you want to jump in on this topic or anything else related to VA disability, reach out to us at 800-222-5222. We are here live this evening. You're also welcome to submit questions on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Just search Veterans Law Group and you will find us. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I am a veteran advocate and managing attorney at the Veterans Law Group. And our expertise is helping veterans and their families navigate the process of dealing with the VA on multiple fronts. This evening, we're shared as a co-host here with Star, who is a U.S. Air Force veteran, gone through this process herself with her family, and also assists us with helping veterans kind of navigate it as well. Before we went to the break, we were talking about a couple things. First, the new executive legislation that was signed by President Biden, talking about how they're treating sexual harassment in the military. And then we were diving into the topic of the evening, about veterans pursuing 100% disability, or at least a permanent disability, and kind of why that is. And we are taking your calls this evening live. If you are a veteran or a family member or somebody who would just like to contribute to the conversation or ask a question, we're here at 800-222-5222. And I understand that we have somebody on the line, David in Washington. Is that correct?
Hello, yes, David Evans from Woodland, Washington.
Thank you for joining us. How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Thank you guys for what you do. My father suffered from PTSD, or battle fatigue, they called it, or shell shock, World War II. He spent his remaining life after the war incarcerated pretty much in VA care facilities. He was a real basket case. Landed in Normandy, fought through the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium, and finally lost it, and was pretty much non-functional after that. I was in the Marine Corps 4 years. I was in Vietnam for about a year. I too suffer from PTSD. We inadvertently killed little kids, and that was kind of the trigger for me.
Sure.
I've got a friend that was a helicopter Huey flight mechanic and door gunner, and in between missions, battle missions, they sprayed a lot of Agent Orange, which I heard on your program you guys talked about. He ended up with diabetes, suffered the loss of both legs, and pretty much, fully wheelchair bound. They have a lot of good programs through the VA, but the monetary compensation isn't enough for good quality care if you want to stay in your own home. The VA, as you know, you deal with this stuff every day, I'm sure. Post 9/11 veterans are current. Nobody cares much about Vietnam, and certainly not World War II now, but we have people all over the country with family members who've been injured in the wars since 9/11. 7,000 U.S. troops were killed since 9/11 in various wars, primarily Afghanistan, Iraq. 30,000 have committed suicide since coming home from those wars. We've had 50,000 wounded, approximately, many of them seriously, who will require lifetime care. There's just not adequate funding when we continue spending trillions of dollars on these wars in the Middle East that are for Israel. There's an Oded plan of essentially using the U.S. to secure Israel's little realm in that part of the world. Since 9/11, all of these people have been injured. We're spending trillions of dollars. We don't have adequate health care for our veterans. Our bridges are falling down all over the country. Infrastructure in cities are rotting. It seems to me, rather than overburden an already burdened VA health care system, that our Congress, which is pretty much controlled in foreign policy by the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, refuses to take care of Americans first while they continue squandering trillions of dollars on these unnecessary wars that are damaging America. This has to be put out there to the people that have been fighting these wars. They need to know that they weren't fighting for America. They're fighting for the Israelis. We were hit on 9/11 because of Israel.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, like I'm not going to jump in the politics of Israel or where at the end of it is. My job at the end of the day is if somebody signs up to represent America, and as you mentioned, there's a difference between post 9/11 and the Vietnam and the World War II. And I will specifically say that, grateful to your family for your service. And I have, again, as I mentioned with the MST cases at the beginning of this show this evening, I have a particular heart for the Vietnam veterans, specifically those who didn't sign up to go, or they signed up not knowing really what they were getting into, the people who were drafted. And then you add the whole Agent Orange debacle on top of it that we basically hurt our own soldiers. And that's part of the promise. That's part of the contract that we signed, and the promise that we made is to help take care of you all to the best that we can. And I agree that there's been, we're not a perfect country, and we're definitely not a perfect bureaucracy. And when it gets into the government solutions to things, it can get really complicated. I am certainly somebody who believes that, if we're not prepared to take care of the men and women in our lives that are going out there to defend, we should definitely consider that cost as part of the cost of war. And I, again, this isn't a political show. I'm not going to jump into the politics of that, other than it really isn't a left-wing, right-wing, progressive, non-progressive perspective that everybody seems to come to the same page when you want to take care of the veterans and the people who sacrificed for our country. And I agree, we haven't done necessarily a great job of that. But I appreciate the commitment that our country has to veterans and to pursuing and making efforts and trying to make improvements, even though it can be a stumbling block along the way. And I would love, Star, if you want to jump in, you're more than welcome to. Just a perspective of, I always see it as like, I work in appeals, and so I see it when the VA doesn't get it right. People are coming to our office because the VA isn't getting it right. And we're not seeing where the VA does get it right. And there are certainly people who are taken care of by the VA. My uncle was one of those. He was a Vietnam veteran. He knew what I did for a living and have been doing for years. Unfortunately, he died recently, but he never came to me for help because he said, no, I'm good. Like, the VA's taking care of me and I'm good. And he was somebody who was drafted, sent to Vietnam involuntarily. So, it's one of those things where you want to walk and say, okay, we got to deal with what we got, and we're going to do the best we can, and we're going to advocate for the people we can advocate. Star, you're welcome to jump in if you'd like.
I agree with you with just the not seeing when the VA actually gets it right. I do come across several veterans just because I advocate all the time as a veteran myself. I want to get that word out no matter what. So I'm always just, whenever I come across a veteran, letting them know, like, hey, if you got that decision and you're not happy with it, there is a way to appeal it. And I do come across some that are like, no, I got what I wanted, and I'm happy with where I'm at. It doesn't happen that often, but I do feel like there are some times where the VA, seems to get it right. But I do see that, there is an issue with the funding. And sometimes it seems like that's kind of where the block might be with giving all of the veterans the ratings that they deserve right away when they deserve them, instead of having to fight and kind of get a pushback every time. And, from a veteran, it's one of those things where sometimes you feel like the VA says no until you become a bother. And once you become a bother, then they're like, okay, well, finally I'll look at it. So sometimes,
that's true in so many areas of life, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that can be very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that there's, people who are a little bit on a, heightened sense of concern of what's currently going on, Russia, Ukraine, what recently went on in Afghanistan. And it's like, how long are we going to continue to do this? And at the same time, I also see people who either currently serving in the military or recently got out, and they're like, look, we go where we are needed. I believe God gave us this gift as Americans to have the ability to help those who are in need. Doesn't mean I think we should get involved all the time, but I know that there's a heightened state of concern of, a European war, or what happened in Afghanistan. So I can't control any of that. I can have an opinion. We can talk about it. At the end of the day, the thing that I know that I can do, and I know that I can help, is in the box that God gave me, which is to help veterans who are post-military, trying to get on their feet. Even David mentioned talking about coming back with PTSD, and his father wasn't the same person and struggled and was incarcerated for a while. We help a lot of incarcerated veterans. Just because you're incarcerated doesn't mean that you don't deserve what you should have gotten based upon the military. And we've seen, a lot of things contribute to incarceration that came out of the VA as well. So it's sad to hear those stories for sure, but I'll give a very quick example. Me and one of the paralegals in my office, we have done quite a bit of outreach to incarcerated veterans here in California, going specifically and visiting them in their communities. And they, even in the prisons, have these veterans groups that they get together and they have their meetings, and they start with a pledge of allegiance and a prayer, and are incredibly respectful to us. And they all have different stories and how they ended up there and why they ended up there. And, we're going to do a show coming up on specifically related to incarcerated veterans and their families, and that the complications of getting VA benefits and when you're incarcerated. So we'll definitely do that on a upcoming show. We're up against a break. We'll be right back. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC. We're attorney at the Veterans Law Group. We've been talking this evening, as we do every Tuesday evening, about kind of things that are affecting veterans, whether it's VA disability benefits, which is what we do, or organizations supporting veterans. This evening we are live and taking your calls. If you have a question or a comment that kind of fits within the space, you can contact us at 800-222-5222. Before we went into the break, we were talking a little bit about navigating the VA process, kind of some perspective. I'm trying not to get into too much of a political argument about how the VA and our country treats veterans. It seems to be one of those things that I feel like we're all on the same side of, in the fact that we want to help veterans. It's just maybe a different perspective on how to do that. But there are certainly people who are contacting our office on a daily basis that are World War II veterans, Vietnam veterans, Korea, Afghanistan, even during peacetime, because those things can happen. Injuries can happen that are not in a combat environment, where it's, accidents, back injuries, PTSD from non-combat related things. So, again, we're here live this evening. You can contact us at 800-222-5222. Again, this is Amanda with the Veterans Voice, and I am joined this evening as a co-host is Star. She is a U.S. Air Force veteran and a paralegal, and has gone through this process as well. Star, before we jump into a little bit more of what we were talking about, I understand we have Daryl on the line. I would like to ask Daryl to join us from California. Do you have a question or a comment for us?
Yes, I do. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm 100%, but I am 100% with the IU, the unemployability. I got rated to begin with when I first went to the VA, which was after I retired, because I went kind of bonkers after that. But anyway, I got rated at 80% PTSD plus, diabetes and hearing issues. Then I later went for my unemployability, which I got, and I got it with a non-reviewable permanent when they sent back my letter. So I'm guaranteed 100% as far as I know. I know the government can always change their mind, but I don't think they're going to bother, because I'm going to be 74 years old here pretty soon.
You're probably in good shape.
My main question is, we're talking about the IU and permanent, as far as like physical, mental, if you're permanent 100% that way. The difference between the two, from what I understand, what people tell me, there's only the big difference is that if I die or something like that, I'm not eligible for payment like to my family or something like that. And so I want to know what the main difference is between unemployability and a permanent physical or mental disability.
Sure. Well, and I think I can maybe help clarify that for you. So the VA does have a regulation that if you're rated at 100% disability for a period of 10 years, then that does qualify your family, your dependents or your spouse, after you die, regardless of what you ultimately becomes the result of your death or the reason for your death. The difference between a physical disability and a mental health disability is that when it comes to family benefits afterwards, if you're within those 10 years and you don't, I hate to say it this way, but I'm just going to be blunt with you. If you don't die from something that is, service related, then that affects your ability to benefit. So for example, Vietnam veteran, Agent Orange exposure, say you die and the result of your die is diabetes. That's a service connected disability. They automatically recognize that as something that you died from that, and your family, your dependents are entitled to something. If you have a PTSD rating with a TDIU, you're getting 100% disability if you're under those 10 years. They don't really equate any reason for dying as related to your PTSD. That's going to be debatable. I believe that's going to be litigated in the future. But that's the only kind of like hiccup in there. So with our clients, we're always pursuing what is the maximum benefit we can get them with the earliest effective date. And I've got clients that I know I can get them no more monetary benefit for themselves. But if they, like one of the cases I was working on just this week, he's PTSD 100% under TDIU, and he had a head injury when he was in the service, and he's suffering from dementia now. We're pursuing his service connection for dementia secondary to that TBI, sorry, traumatic brain injury, because should he die from that, his wife will get benefits that he wouldn't if he wasn't service connected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah. Basically, I guess what you're telling me, 10 years is the pretty
magic
much
number.
The breakdown.
Yeah.
So 10 years, under 10 years, it's going to be debatable, like I guess you say. Once you hit 10 years, you're good. Then following within.
Yeah, and 10 years is from the day it's effective. So, if you've been through this process, sometimes it can take a couple years for you to get your benefit, but it's about that effective date. So if your effective date was 2012 or before, then you're in the clear for that, even if it's under TDIU.
The effective date is when I first filed the first time when I got rated at 80%.
Yes, should be.
Yeah, so that'll be the effective date. Okay.
Yeah.
That's been a few years, so it hasn't been quite 10, but I'm getting close.
Well, then anything, like if you're a Vietnam veteran, then anything that, pay attention to those presumptions. And even though it may not get you additional compensation now, it may be worth applying for and just getting at least service connected for, your family.
Okay. Okay, I guess that pretty well answers my question. And just want to let you know, I'm part of the Veterans Voice Council in Long Beach, helping veterans there too as a volunteer. Since I've been through the full process of almost everything there, and me and a few other guys got together that were going through the same thing. Now we're there with our own group, and we kind of monitor what's going on. And I do go to meetings with the directors and all those when I have complaints that they're not being taken care of. So I'm doing my best to help the veterans that are coming in now. So and hopefully
that's
to
awesome.
continue.
And it's an amazing community, the way that I see veterans helping other veterans. It's beautiful, and I can hear Star wanting to say something here. So Star, jump in before we get a break.
I did just want to add really quick because you brought up a really good point. So for family members, what I always recommend is if it is something that you think could possibly be what takes you out, I guess is how I'll put it. But if that's what you think is going to take you out, make sure that you put it in your will. So get a will started and make sure that you let them know that they have to apply for that dependency indemnity compensation, DIC, within 1 year, because the VA is going to hold them to applying within that 1 year to get what they're owed if it is something that is service connected or if you are after that 10-year mark.
Well, I've got things that I know they're kind of service connected, but at this point they're not really recognizing as part of me because I've been hit with rounds, well, not directly, but right next to them, and I've got like physical problems that are internal, but they're not where external where people can see them. Like my spine is messed up, and I have like some damages in my brain also. But they're not recognizing any of this thing. It's hard for me to get through to them. I went to see doctors and everything else, and nobody wants to verify anything.
Daryl, it still might be worth making that application to the VA, even knowing you're going to get denied. We're coming up against a break, but I just want to make sure that this is clear to everybody that the VA and Congress, they are constantly changing things. And so, like just recently, they just added a few more conditions to the presumptive list for Agent Orange. Those people who filed for those things previously and had them, like bladder cancer 10 years ago, they then will get granted that back 10 years ago because they initially claimed it. Where if you don't and you just wait and you say, well, it's not on the presumptive list, so I'm not going to apply for it, just remember that the VA has come back and Congress has passed laws that have added things to those conditions. So if you're suffering from a condition or you have a condition that you think might be related to that, just put in the application. It'll probably get denied, but you're already getting 100%, so it's not going to hurt you. But it might put something in there for your family. I often talk about how pursuing VA disability benefits, and these benefits in general can be a part of your financial plan for your family. I am, as always, a veteran advocate and a managing attorney at the Veterans Law Group, and we are chatting this evening about VA disability benefits. I've got my periodic co-host here, Star, who is a U.S. Air Force veteran and paralegal in our office, and we've been talking a little bit about VA benefits, 100% disability, the reasons why you pursue that, why it matters. It doesn't matter in everybody's cases. I think, too, if we agree that it's really more about a veteran wanting to know that whatever they're rated, it's permanent and the VA isn't going to come and call them in for an examination on a regular basis. That seems to be more of the fear than necessarily chasing the 100%. But the 100% disability, it's a tax-free benefit, and it's, oftentimes, especially with many of the people that we work with, they're have a disability to the point that they're struggling to provide for their family. And so this is what we as civilians and have agreed to in the contract that they signed to help to take care of them. So Star, welcome back. I would love to get into a little bit about, yeah, absolutely, a little bit about the difference between a schedular 100%, what we call that, versus 100% based on IU. So I want to clarify, we've heard it said on this radio show before, it's called IU, TDIU, unemployability, but I'm going to clear the acronym here. It's TDIU is total disability based on unemployability, or IU, individual unemployability. All it really means is you haven't reached the 100% rating based upon just your disabilities, but the VA says, hey, but it's all affecting your ability to work, so we're going to pay you at that 100% rate. So if you want to help me clarify a little bit about how people get to a schedular 100 versus TDIU, I'm going to let you jump in.
Okay, awesome. So, yeah, I get this a lot. With schedular 100%, you're going to have to deal with the VA math and the VA calculations that they do for it. So technically, if you do regular math, like 1 + 1 = 2, you're going to have about 190 to a 230% addition before you actually reach that 100% mark with the VA doing VA math.
Let's clarify that really quickly. So each time when you file for disability on each individual thing, so your ankle, your back, your shoulder, your PTSD, the VA is first going to rate them individually based upon statute. You have these symptoms, so you get this percentage for each one of those. Then they put it in their magic calculator of 10 plus 40 plus 80 plus 60 plus 20 equals 75, right?
Exactly.
And that 75 rolls up to 80, and that, because it's always on the tens, and then that determines what the monthly benefit is. So I'll let you take it from there. So that's what you're saying of, you almost need a 190 if you do regular math to get to 100% magic VA calculator math. Okay.
Yes. So when they put it into their chart, they're going to go from the highest rating that they have, and then they kind of go over to whatever your next highest rating would be. And that's how they kind of skip through their chart to figure out what percentage you're at. With that, you're not always going to make it to that 100% schedular rating, which is all of your disabilities added up in the VA calculations at 100%. And when that happens, you are going to get cut short. But that doesn't mean that you aren't able to work because of your disabilities, you just have to notify the VA that you should be paid at that 100% for that TDIU, that individual unemployability. So the
Right.
TDIU pays you at the 100% rate if you cannot meet the schedular rating to get you to the 100%. And with that, the TDIU, you have to prove certain things to the VA in order to get it. The VA is paying the compensation based on the fact that if you were the way you were before you got injured from the military, you should be at this earning capacity. But because you got injured, they're going to go ahead and give you the compensation at the ratings that they feel those injuries cause, and limits you in your earnings. So if you feel that it should be at 100% and that your disabilities keep you from working and you apply for individual unemployability, you have to have a 70% overall with 140% issue rated, or you have to have at least one issue at a 60% rating, and that's for the percentage requirement. And then you have to also have the income base. So you could be working part-time, you could be working full-time, but as long as you're not earning more than the national poverty limit, which for a single veteran is $12,000 a year. So if you're earning under that and you meet those requirements for the percentages, then you can apply for that individual unemployability, which will pay you at the 100% rate, even if you don't meet the percentage calculation.
Absolutely. So what I want to do is try to simplify it a little bit, because as we're coming up the end of the show, I don't want to end at the end of it with a whole bunch of legalese and dropping, a bunch of calculations. So the basics of that, and hopefully on the next show or the next couple of shows, we might be able to dig into a little bit more of this. Again, always kind of navigating the let's provide education, but we also want to take calls live and answer your questions directly. But I'm going to kind of end this show on a little bit of just substantive education to veterans or families. We work with so many spouses and with so many parents that are helping the veteran to walk through this process, because it can become incredibly frustrating, especially if you're at the point where you're struggling with helping your family and supporting your family. And that's where that unemployability comes in. I know many times it's one of the hardest things for a veteran to admit or to say, or to just ask for help. But the other thing is say, look, I'm having a hard time working and providing for my family, and Star, I know that you know exactly what I'm talking about here. It's just a provision before the VA to say, if the reason why you're struggling with providing for your family and maintaining what they call gainful employment, that's the legalese in there, which is more than $12,000 a year. And let's be honest, we live in Southern California. $12,000 a year is ridiculous. Yeah. When they say poverty line at $12,000 a year and they look at it nationally, and we're like, do you see where we live? Do you see the property values? But just getting back to the heart of it is that if you're a veteran or a spouse or a family member and you see that the veteran in your life is struggling with maintaining employment, this is an option with the VA, and it is not something that is permanent. That's something that is often very misunderstood. People think if you get unemployability before the VA, you can never work again. It can be a stopgap. It can be like unemployability through California EDD. It's a period of time in which you're providing income for your family from a service that you provided to our country. So it's not something that you have to, forever do or forever be a part of, but it does provide you that 100% disability, which ballpark, it's ballpark around $36,000 a year, depending on how many dependents you have and spouse and all that kind of thing. But it's tax-free money that is provided to help you maybe during the process of rehabilitation to get another job that can help you. Or maybe it is, as one of our earlier callers talked about, how after he quit working, things got a little crazy. And I thought about that when he said that. That's not an uncommon thing that we hear. and is well known, is that PTSD symptoms often can get exasperated after retirement and trying to kind of find your way. So what I want to say before we're about to wrap up here is that if you are a veteran and you don't want to talk publicly about your case and you want to reach out to us directly, you can reach us at veteranslaw.com or 888-811-0523, or you're always welcome to join us every Tuesday evening from 7 to 8 o'clock here on 790 KABC. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. We'll see you next week.